So right at the gate, I want to confess that I'm an American citizen, but I watch European consumer debates that take place, especially in the European Parliament. Just from the perspective of I was impressed ultimately that Apple was pressured by the European Union to retire lightning cables and go over to USB-C. I was also especially impressed by the fact that channels like Mental Outlaw in particular ended up in support of this. Because he strikes me as a bit of a libertarian, and the idea of government interference forcing a company to do the right thing just struck me as maybe something that Kenny would be against. But he shocked me in that regard. Thank you. Also, I'll have to credit that guy with my exploration of Linux in the past couple of years and realization that I'm running out of excuses to be on Windows. Because I know Linux increasingly well. My savvy has increased exponentially. So, you know, also just hands on because I used Gen 2 for a while. But I started paying attention because of that, and I wanted to add a point, to what I saw in the European, Parliament that took place, and an argument that hadn't been made, and hopefully I'll get the ear of an MP here to say it at everything on the Stop Killing Games initiative. But if you do not care about video games, that's fine. In this channel, I do, but I don't fault you if you don't. But you still have a reason to care about the Stop Killing Games initiative, for the simple fact that I don't know if you know this, but when they say that you have a right to a speedy trial in practice in the United States, last I was involved with that system, speedy trial, quote unquote, meant 9 months. Like 3/4 of a year. That's not what I would consider, speedy turnaround for, a trial and everything. And what it revealed to me is that our court system is overburdened, and that there's too much on the docket already, and too many cases in the civil court system and everything. And so you want to do everything you can to keep people out of being involved in the courts at all. And a point of discussion came up about how the current framework did not offer adequate redress for the problem, simply because refunding a consumer really didn't address the issue of ultimately the lost heritage, and the fact that they had lost access to this game. And some proposals that I would offer are things like like allowing, releasing the source code for the servers so that people can run private servers, and speed up that process, and, documentation on how to run the servers as well, and everything, and requiring them to do that, or simply releasing an offline version of it, and planning this forward. This may not apply retroactively to old games like The Crew, because grandfathering it in is much more expensive, but, let's make sure that going forward they can't keep doing this, that it has to stop. Anyways, about the European law, if you don't care about video games, here's why you should still care about this issue. Okay, they talked about how the system at hand was not sufficient to deal with the problem because it didn't deal with the destruction of the video games. It just offered a refund for the consumer, and people are just concerned about the preservation angle and losing access to a bit of our cultural history and everything. Well, anyways, if we go like, okay, I don't care about video games, why should I care about this one? Well, if consumers were to sue every time a company killed a game and destroyed somebody's access to it and everything, hypothetically, if they were to sue for a refund, it would take our already overburdened court system and burden it some more. And if that were to happen in the United States, it would overburden the system, and it's probably similar in Europe. I don't know how, I don't know how much the European courts are, burdened and everything, because I don't live there, so I've got no reason to know. But at the same time, it's likely because like there are thousands of individual cases of this that happen every year. So I mean, you're gonna you have to you want them to pass legislation requiring them to have some plan in place to preserve the game after its end of life, from the company's perspective at least, and everything, so that gamers still have access to it after the company stops supporting it. Well, if like I said, just from the perspective of keeping people out of the court and keeping civil society running in an orderly fashion and everything, and keeping trial times within at least a semi reasonable rate, like amount of time before things go to trial, and keeping the civil order of society in place, and so that you have you know you keep these people out of the courtrooms. Because I mean, if this turns into a lawsuit every time somebody does this, and every time there's a case of like the one that's going up against the crew for the terminating access for them, then the courts are going to get clogged up like crazy, and it's going to slow the whole system down. It'd be like pouring molasses in the gear system instead of oil. It will run faster for a little bit, and then catastrophe, you know, as everything gunks up and everything, and the gears start to overheat, and they're now sticky, the wheels and everything, and that would not be that would not ultimately be a good thing for something like that to happen. And so like, assume that you don't care about games, you still should support the Stop Killing Games initiative, because like I said, it'll keep these cases out of the courtrooms,